Hi there, I'm Dr. Victor Seghers, and I'm the Chief of Community Radiology here at Texas Children's Hospital. Thank you so much for inviting me to this lecture series. I'll be discussing the leadership lessons that I learned during my radiology training as well as early in my career, and giving some examples about how these lessons actually aided development in my academic career, but then also giving some examples about how incomplete understanding of leadership actually started to hurt and threaten to derail my career. So I've been out of fellowship training for roughly 10 years now. I'm a pediatric radiologist by training. And what I had learned really came at my daily readouts with the attending at the PAC stations. I didn't receive any formal training on leadership or professionalism. But two important lessons did stand out during my residency training. One was don't box yourself in early in your career. So there's a great desire as we get out of our radiology training to say I'm a musculoskeletal radiologist, or I've done a dedicated fellowship in women's imaging or neuro imaging, and so that's what I want to do, 100% neuro, or I want to be 100% clinical, so I have no interest in any academic work. And so one thing that was imparted to me is that early on we don't really understand what we're good at and maybe some of our weaknesses, and if we allow ourselves to inhibit ourselves, then we limit ourselves for potential opportunities for growth. The second thing that I had learned was actually from my chairman in my radiology training program, Dr. George Leopold, and so he liked to say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so what that means is don't allow your own insecurities to limit yourself or prevent you from taking a leadership role, because you may actually know more than everybody else there in the room. So roughly 1 year out of fellowship training, I was invited to become the director of pediatric body CT and body MR imaging at Texas Children's Hospital, which was the first job I had post-training. It's a pretty small role. I was editing and creating new imaging protocols. It was helpful to allow me to get my hands dirty with learning about MR sequences. I did manage the operations and help manage the relationships between the MR and CT technologists and the radiologists. But even though it was a small role, it did give me an opportunity to start to learn about basic management leadership skills. I certainly made a lot of mistakes early. I learned the hard way about creating policy without getting buy-in up front. But then I was able to learn from those mistakes by then changing and then starting with small changes with a small group of people, getting some success, and then starting to have incremental expansion and building on that success. Based on my role as the director of body CT and body MR, at the same time we started to have a great deal of changes within the hospital itself. The Department of Pediatric Radiology was starting to become a lot more academic. We started to have a lot of changes within our administrative structure in the hospital. And we previously had a system where we had private nuclear medicine contractors reading out the nuclear medicine exams, and we decided to overhaul our whole department and actually bring the Department of Nuclear Medicine under the umbrella of our Department of Pediatric Radiology. I'd always enjoyed pediatric radiology and nuclear medicine, and so I felt that this was going to be a good opportunity for me, and when I was offered to take over the leadership role, I decided to take a stab at it. Now at this time, I really only had the most basic common perspectives of leadership. Leadership is a position. So your position grants you the authority to lead. Leadership is genetic, so leaders are born, not made, and this explains why we always have a group of diverse leaders from very different backgrounds that can somehow rise to the top. You can think of Napoleon or Gandhi. Leadership is about charisma, so there's something about these leaders that allows them to work with people, whether it's excessive warmth, but there's something about it that allows them to lead and get people to follow them. However, even though leadership can be genetic, there are a certain common set of characteristics. There are thousands and thousands of management leadership textbooks. So if one wants to learn about leadership, you simply read some of these books. And then finally, I had the idea that leadership is learned through experience, and so I was interested in taking on new roles and new opportunities so I could continue to grow. So with this, I agreed to become the section chief of nuclear medicine. So upon agreeing to become the section chief of nuclear medicine, I had to deal with several challenges. The first of which is I was the only radiologist, so I was on call literally 24/7. So I had to recruit internal Texas Children's radiologists and get them to agree to join the section and convince them that I could be an able leader and convince them that joining the section would be very good for their academic career. I had to learn about and revise all of the prior nuclear medicine protocols. I had to gain the confidence of the nuclear medicine technologists. There was a major cultural change for them. They'd previously been working with nuclear medicine trained physicians who were not even part of Texas Children's. They were private contractors, and now teach them about dealing with the Department of Pediatric Radiology at Texas Children's. I had to gain the confidence of the other referring physicians at Texas Children's Hospital. I certainly had to familiarize myself with the referral patterns of nuclear medicine and then start giving both clinical and promotional conferences to the various groups, giving grand rounds to the hospitals, for instance. And then finally, I had to reestablish relationships with my prior mentors in both residency and fellowship, who, even though I was on very good terms with them, the last time I had seen them, they had seen me as a pediatric radiologist, not as a nuclear medicine physician. So I had to reestablish those contacts in order to get their help. And then finally, in working with them, realized that I finally had to become board certified in nuclear medicine myself in order to get buy-in from them that I could be an able person to join their team. During this time, I picked up another kernel of leadership information, and it was there are only two types of people: problem solvers and problem creators. You should only hire one of them. And this comes from Dr. Leonard Swischuk at UTMB Pediatric Radiology. And so there are two ways that one can think about this. One is it's an active choice. You can either choose to be a problem solver or you can choose to be a problem creator. I actually took a different attitude where if I was not actively solving a problem, then by default I became a problem creator. And so this had some positive aspects to my career, but also certainly led to some challenges I'll go into later on. So once the nuclear medicine department became more settled, we started to have another change. Our hospital was building a new building, and our entire department was now going to be moving into the new building. It was a very exciting and stressful time. It was exciting because I got to participate in choosing new vendor-based camera hardware, something I'd never done before, and so I was able to gain access to learn about finances and how one chooses equipment. But the chair of the radiology department, as well as the board of the hospital, had decided to invest in a brand new invention called PET MRI. It was FDA approved, but it really did not yet receive buy-in from all the referring clinicians, and certainly had not yet received buy-in from insurance companies. So there were going to be some billing challenges as well as some clinical challenges involved with it, and it was going to involve a great deal of comparative research as well as building a brand new line of service. Now, one thing that I hadn't mentioned is that in my career I was actually in the MD-PhD program, so I actually do have a PhD and I'm very capable at leading research projects. The issue with me is that I had never really enjoyed that aspect of my career, and I decided to become 100% clinical, and I'd spent all of my residency and fellowship time as well as in my early career literally running away from every single case report and running away from any particular research or academic project. But now I'm a person who's very well suited to lead this project, and if I chose to not lead this project, I was now going to become a problem creator. So for me, the choice was clear, and so I jumped in and took over and decided to work on managing this project. So I began to establish the research protocols, work with the data acquisition and analysis, getting buy-in from the referring clinicians, as well as the patients, getting buy-in nationally from our pediatric peers. We were the first children's hospital nationally to have PET MRIs. This was a major investment, and then certainly start working on writing up the papers. And the one thing I realized when I was working on this is that originally I thought this was going to me, I based project, but this very quickly morphed into a task-based project. It morphed from a task-based project into a people-based project. I then was able to develop relationships with the camera vendor. The camera vendor was certainly very excited and eager to make our investment work, since we were the first children's hospital with this new technology. I had to develop relationships with these referring clinicians, converting them into partners. I developed relationships with statisticians, research coordinators, physicists, as well as other academic centers who were interested in PET MRI. So the concept that I would be the only one working on this project quickly changed to a team-based approach. This was certainly a lot more fun and a lot less stressful. And then finally, I became a content expert on PET MRI, and I became invited for various national and international lectures. So just the change from post-fellowship into this time was very stark for me, because now I was leading a nuclear medicine section at the vanguard of a new academic research project and being invited as a content expert for various talks. So a few things that I had learned from this experience was that leadership is everyone's business, regardless of their location on the organizational chart. I'd also learned that leadership is fundamentally about relationships, and that finally effective leadership is predicated upon a thorough understanding of oneself, that you need to understand your own strengths and your own weaknesses so that you can enhance the strengths and you can work to mitigate the weaknesses. So by my role as the section chief of nuclear medicine, as well as my role of leading the PET-MR research project, this allowed me to be invited to various non-nuclear medicine and non-radiology meetings and to be involved with multiple non-radiology projects. This further allowed me to meet more and more people and develop and demonstrate my abilities. So when we had another area of growth within Texas Children's Hospital, we had previously built one community hospital and we had just made a decision to build a second, and this was causing us to have another area of growth within our administrative leadership structure. I was then promoted and invited to become the section chief of community radiology, which I am today. However, months into my new role, I started to receive multiple complaints about my behavior. I was receiving complaints about micromanaging, complaints about not respecting boundaries, complaints about being involved with too many projects outside my scope that weren't even dealing with the physicians, but were maybe dealing with the administrators within the hospital. And frankly, I was confused because these are all the things that I've been doing ever since I was the director of Body CT, Body MR, and all the things I was doing when I was leading the nuclear medicine section as well as the PEDMR research project. I was micromanaging. It was by definition micromanaging. Everything really had to flow through me. And the reason why I was becoming successful and was able to be promoted was because I was not respecting boundaries, because I was able to see a problem, fix that problem, move on to the next task. So I really didn't stop my behavior once I started to receive this negative feedback, and then finally I was brought into radiology leadership and formally reprimanded and threatened with career derailment. Now I have to say that the threat really didn't work too much because I didn't understand what career derailment even meant. But fortunately my hospital believes in leadership development, and at the time at which I received my promotion as community chief, I was placed in various formal leadership and professionalism development courses. And almost as if on cue, I started to receive lectures on leadership as well as on this concept of derailment. So successful employees are seen as people who reach roughly the top 10 to 20 positions in their organization. They are seen as living up to their full potential by their group of peers. What derailed means is that somebody achieves a very high level, but they did not go as high as the organization expected. They may have plateaued, they may have been demoted or fired, they may even have had their responsibilities reduced. Research dating in the 1970s suggests that over 50% of managers are deemed ineffective by their organizations, and that 40% fail within the first 18 months on the job. And I can say that for me, I was already failing well before that 18-month timeline. So this concept is even encapsulated in a management theory called the Peter Principle, as espoused by Lawrence Peter. And it basically states that selection of a candidate for a future position is based on their performance in their current role. And this actually makes a lot of sense. So there's always a lot of temptation to use what has worked before, even if it may have exceeded its effective scope. And that's the same for a process, that's the same for the tool, or that's the same for a person. So with this Peter Principle, people stop being promoted once they can no longer perform effectively. So managers rise to the level of their incompetence. And what's interesting is that this incompetence may be because the required skills are simply different from what the skills they already have. It's not that these new skills are any more difficult. So an example is an engineer who has a great deal of technical expertise, but they don't have the interpersonal skills to be able to lead their team. So one joke is that all public employees should be demoted to their immediately lower level as they've been promoted until turning incompetent. And that would certainly help out the DMV. So if you look at reasons for initial success, it's typically always the same things. So somebody makes an impressive impact in a functional or a technical area, somebody's seen as uncommonly bright, somebody is seen as very charismatic, it's somebody who's very loyal to the organization, somebody who does whatever is required to achieve success. And I think on a lot of these aspects I had demonstrated these traits as well. What I didn't appreciate though is that leadership is not a set finite series of rules. There's a changing nature of leadership. There's an increased emphasis on relationship skills. There's continuous learning and developing of others, constant adaptation to changing demands, tolerance of uncertainty and ambiguity. It's not black or white. And coaching, not commanding. You don't tell the people you're working with what to do, you give them advice and let them do their roles. So when we look at why physician executives derail, it's oftentimes they're insensitive or they're arrogant. So they've been continually promoted based on their attributes. So now they've always been the smartest person in the room. They're going to continue to do this, and they tell everybody, well, this is what we're going to do. They become very arrogant with their staff. They micromanage. They're unable to adapt to a new boss. So maybe they were in prior positions with one set of superior administrators, and now they move into a different role with a new set of bosses, and they cannot adapt to the new culture. They may fight the wrong battles. They're seen as untrustworthy. They may lack specific skills or knowledge for this new promotion. So basically, I was able to have the opportunity to be reminded or taught of some of these issues since I was brought in by radiology leadership very early on. And so I was able to affect a change and so get my career back on track. And so my concept of leadership has changed yet again based on all of these experiences. So one, I now realize that leaders may fail from a common set of reasons, but leaders succeed for different reasons. Failure is often related to the leader's inability to establish meaningful relationships with others. Organizations infrequently give feedback on the very characteristics most likely to lead to failure, and this is where I was fortunately saved. Organizations often promote people based on attributes demonstrated in the prior job, with the full knowledge that this may cause derailment at the next level. So for me, I'm still very much early in my career. I still hopefully have a lot of growth, hopefully decades worth of growth that I can go through. So certainly my concept of leadership will continue to change over the next few decades. I would just advise all of you, again, don't limit yourselves when you first come out of training. Don't imagine that you know everything and know exactly what you want. Be open to new opportunities and new ideas, even if it does stress you out. That may be a sign that this is an area that you should go into because you can change a weakness into an area of strength. And then please be mindful of this adapting nature of leadership. That's not really a common set of rules, that you need to continually grow and improve yourself as you mature throughout your careers and start to lead others. Thank you very much.